The chaos in the meeting room continued for several minutes as aliens shouted at each other in multiple languages. Veltar tried to restore order by calling for security, while several Zephyrian merchants demanded that Jake be arrested for destroying valuable property. The Kethai diplomats buzzed angrily about the damage this would do to interspecies relations. Through it all, Jake stood calmly beside Lyra, who was still glowing so brightly that her blue skin looked like a star. She had risen from her knees, and now stood with her shoulders back and her head held high. The transformation was remarkable. The broken servant was gone, and in her place stood a proud Etherian woman. "This is not overhuman," hissed Sktal as he pointed a clawed finger at Jake. "You have violated sacred commercial law. There will be consequences for your actions." "I'm sure there will be," Jake replied calmly. "But Laura is still free, and that's what matters." A Vorthan that looked like a cluster of purple crystals spoke in a voice like wind chimes. "You do not understand what you have done. The servitude system maintains stability across dozens of worlds. Without it, there would be chaos and war." "There's already chaos and war," Jake said. "You've just hidden it behind legal contracts and fancy language." Veltar finally managed to get the room quiet enough to speak. His skin had turned a deep red color that Jake guessed meant extreme agitation. "Mr. Martinez, while your actions may technically be legal, they represent a dangerous precedent. The galactic community will need time to consider the implications." "Consider whatever you want," Jake said, "but you'll do it without owning Lyra." Jake took Lyra's hand and walked toward the door. She followed willingly, but Jake could feel her trembling. The weight of sudden freedom, after 5 years of servitude, was overwhelming. Several aliens tried to block their path, but Jake pushed through them without stopping. As they left the building, Jake heard Veltar calling after them. "Mr. Martinez, you will be held responsible for any economic damage caused by your reckless actions. The law firms representing injured parties will be in contact." Jake didn't bother to respond. He and Lyra walked through the corridors of the legal complex in silence. Other aliens stopped and stared as they passed. Word of what had happened was already spreading through the station's communication. Networks dot when they reached the transport platform. Jake finally stopped and looked at Lyra. Her skin was still glowing, but not as brightly as before. Her silver hair moved in the artificial breeze from the ventilation system, and her black eyes were wide with wonder. "How do you feel?" Jake asked. "I feel like I'm dreaming," Lyra said in her musical voice. "For 5 years I dreamed of this moment, but I never believed it would actually happen. It's not a dream. You're really free." Lyra's eyes filled with tears that sparkled like diamonds. "I don't know how to be free. I've been a servant for so long, I don't remember what it's like to make my own choices." "You'll remember," Jake said. "It might take time, but you'll remember." They rode the transport back to Jake's apartment building in comfortable silence. Jake noticed that other passengers stared at them with curiosity. A human and a glowing. Etherian traveling together as equals was apparently unusual enough to attract attention. When they reached the apartment, Lyra stopped in the doorway, looking confused. For the first time in 5 years, she didn't know what she was supposed to do, or where she was supposed to go. "This is your home, too, for as long as you want it to be," Jake said. "You don't have to ask permission to enter." Lyra walked into the living room and looked around like she was seeing it for the first time. The expensive furniture and alien artwork suddenly seemed different when viewed through the eyes of a free person instead of a servant. "What happens now?" Lyra asked. "Whatever you want to happen. You can stay here or go anywhere in the galaxy. You can do any job you want or learn any skill that interests you. For the first time in 5 years, the choice is entirely yours." The concept seemed to overwhelm Lyra. She sat down on the couch and stared at her hands. "I have dreamed of freedom for so long," but I never planned what I would do if I actually got it. Jake's communication system chimed with an incoming message. The screen showed the face of Ben Collins calling from Earth. Jake accepted the call, and his friend's worried expression filled the display. "Jake, what have you done?" Ben said without any greeting. "The news is all over the human networks. You destroyed a 1,000,000-credit servitude contract. Are you insane?" "I freed an innocent person," Jake replied. "I thought you would understand that. I understand that you've probably destroyed your life and damaged humanity's reputation in the galaxy. Do you have any idea how many angry aliens are calling for sanctions against human colonies right now?" Jake looked at Lyra sitting on the couch with wonder and joy still shining in her black eyes. "It was worth it." "Worth it?" "Jake, you're going to be sued by every alien business interest in this sector. The legal fees alone will bankrupt you. Then I'll be bankrupt. Some things are more important than money." Ben sighed and rubbed his forehead. "Jake, I'm your friend, so I'm going to help you as much as I can. But you need to understand that you're in serious trouble. Start documenting everything and prepare for a long legal battle." After ending the call, Jake received dozens more messages from human officials, alien businesses, and news organizations. Most of the humans were angry about the diplomatic damage he had caused. Most of the aliens were threatening legal action or economic retaliation. But buried among the angry messages were a few different voices. A young human colonist named Lisa. Park sent a video message saying that Jake had inspired her to question the servitude system on her world. An Etherian refugee named Kess sent a brief note thanking Jake for giving his people hope. That evening, Jake and Lyra sat in the kitchen eating dinner together, as they had for the past few days. But everything felt different now. Lyra was no longer serving Jake as his property. She was sharing a meal with him as a free person. "I've been thinking about what you said," Lyra told Jake as they ate. "About me being able to go anywhere or do anything. There's something I want to do, but I don't know if it's possible." "What is it?" "I want to help other Etherians who are still trapped in servitude. I want to find a way to free them like you freed me." Jake smiled. "I think that's exactly what you should do. And I want to help." Over the following weeks, Jake and Lyra worked together to understand the scope of Etherian servitude across the galaxy. They discovered that thousands of Jake's people were still trapped in contracts similar to the one Lyra had escaped. Most of them had been separated from their families and scattered across different worlds. Lyra used her knowledge of Etherian culture and language to make contact with servants on other stations and colonies. Many of them were afraid to communicate openly, but word spread through hidden networks that a human had freed an Etherian and was willing to help others. Jake used his inherited wealth to hire lawyers and investigate the legal options for challenging more servitude contracts. It was expensive and complicated work, but Jake was determined to find ways to free more Etherians. The alien business community fought back hard. Jake faced lawsuits from dozens of companies claiming economic damage from his actions. Veltar's law firm alone filed 17 different legal challenges trying to force Jake to pay compensation for destroying Lyra's contract. But Jake also found unexpected allies. A group of young human activists formed an organization called the Galactic Freedom Movement, dedicated to ending alien servitude. Several alien species that had been conquered and enslaved by stronger neighbors began questioning their own participation in the system. Most surprisingly, Jake received a secret message from a Zephyrian lawyer named Vec, who claimed that many members of his species were uncomfortable with the servitude system, but afraid to speak out publicly. Vec offered to provide legal assistance in exchange for anonymity. 6 months after Jake freed Lyra, they had managed to help 12 more Etherians escape their contracts through various legal mechanisms. It was slow work and expensive, but each success proved that the system could be challenged. Lyra had transformed completely during those months. Her confidence grew stronger every day, and she became an eloquent spokesperson for Etherean freedom. She gave interviews to news organizations and spoke at rallies on human colonies. Her story inspired people across the galaxy to question the morality of owning other sentient beings. The political effects of Jake's decision continued to spread. Several human colonies passed laws restricting the ownership of alien servants. 3 alien species withdrew from servitude trade agreements, citing ethical concerns. The Galactic Council was forced to hold hearings on reforming the servitude system. Not all the changes were positive. Some alien governments imposed trade sanctions on human colonies in retaliation for Jake's actions. Several profitable business relationships were damaged or ended entirely. Jake received death threats from alien extremists who saw him as a threat to their way of life. But Jake had no regrets about his decision. Every time he saw Lyra's bright smile or heard her singing the ancient Etherean songs she had rediscovered, he knew he had made the right choice. Every message from a freed Etherean or an inspired human activist confirmed that individual actions could create powerful changes. Jake woke up before sunrise and found Lyra already in the kitchen preparing breakfast. She moved through her morning routine with the same quiet efficiency she had shown every day since he met her, but today felt different. Today, Jake was going to make a decision that would change everything. "Good morning, Lyra," Jake said as he sat down at the table. "Good morning, Jake. I have prepared your usual breakfast. Would you like me to adjust anything?" Jake looked at the perfectly prepared meal and realized this might be the last time Lyra served him as his legal property. The thought made his stomach twist, but also filled him with determination. "Lyra, I need to tell you something. Today, I'm going to meet with all the aliens from the lawyer's office. I'm going to make an announcement about your contract." Lyra's blue skin flickered, and her hands trembled slightly as she set down his coffee cup. "What kind of announcement, Jake?" "I can't tell you the details yet, but I want you to know that whatever happens today, you don't have to be afraid." Lyra stared at him with her large black eyes. For a moment, Jake thought she might ask more questions, but she just nodded and returned to her servant routine. After breakfast, Jake called Veltar's office and requested an emergency meeting with all the same aliens who had been present for the reading of Uncle Richard's will. He told the lawyer that he had made his decision about Lyra's contract and wanted to announce it formally. Veltar seemed surprised by the urgency, but agreed to arrange the meeting for that afternoon. Within hours, Jake received confirmation that all the relevant parties would be present. Word of the meeting spread quickly through Luna Station's alien community, and Jake suspected there would be more observers than just the original group. Jake spent the morning reviewing galactic law on his computer. He searched through thousands of pages of legal documents, looking for any loophole or precedent that might help him. Most of what he found was discouraging. Servitude contracts were considered sacred under galactic law, and breaking them carried severe penalties. But buried deep in the commercial code, Jake found something interesting. There was an obscure provision that allowed property owners to dispose of assets in any manner they saw fit, as long as they followed proper procedures and accepted full responsibility for their actions. Jake read the section over and over again until he was sure he understood it correctly. The law was intended to give business owners flexibility in managing their investments, but the language was broad enough that it might apply to what Jake had in mind. Lyra served him lunch without speaking, and Jake could tell she was nervous about the upcoming meeting. Her usual perfect composure was cracking slightly, and her skin glowed brighter than normal. She kept glancing at him when she thought he wasn't looking. "Lyra," Jake said after they finished eating, "whatever happens this afternoon, I want you to know that you're a good person. You saved those children and sacrificed your freedom for them. That took incredible courage and honor." Lyra's eyes widened in surprise. Thank you, Jake. That means more to me than you know. An hour before the meeting, Jake put on his best clothes and tried to prepare himself mentally for what was about to happen. He knew that his decision would probably destroy any chance he had of success in galactic society. Human leaders would be furious with him for damaging diplomatic relationships. Alien merchants would see him as a threat to their profitable system. But Jake had spent his whole life being poor and powerless. He had always followed other people's rules and done what was expected of him. Today he was going to do something that mattered regardless of the cost. Jake and Lyra walked to the legal complex together. Lyra followed slightly behind him as always. But Jake could feel the tension radiating from her blue skin. She knew something important was about to happen, but she had no idea what. The meeting room was much larger than Veltar's office and filled with more aliens than Jake had expected. All the original attendees were there, including the Zephyrian merchants, the Kethai diplomats, and the Crystal Vorthan. But there were also at least 20 other aliens representing different species and business interests. Jake realized that news of his decision had spread throughout the station. These aliens had come to witness what the young human would do with his inherited servant. Some looked curious, while others seemed predatory like sharks, smelling blood in the water. Veltar gestured for Jake to take a seat at the head of a long conference table. Lyra stood behind his chair, as she had been trained to do. The alien lawyer's skin shifted through several colors as he addressed the crowded room. We are here because Mr. Jake Martinez has requested this meeting to announce his decision regarding the Etherian servant. Lyra, this is a significant business matter that affects multiple commercial interests. Mr. Martinez, please proceed with your announcement. Jake stood up and looked around the room at all the alien faces watching him. He could see greed in the eyes of the merchants, who hoped to buy Lyra's contract. He saw curiosity from the diplomats, who wondered what the human would do. He saw calculation from the business leaders, who were evaluating his decision for future reference. Thank you all for coming, Jake began. I know many of you have been waiting to see what I would do with Lyra's servitude contract. Some of you have made generous offers to purchase the contract. Others have given me advice about how to properly manage my new asset. Several aliens nodded approvingly. The Zephyrian merchant Sktao leaned forward with interest, clearly expecting Jake to announce a sale. I've spent the last few days learning about galactic law and the servitude system that governs relationships between species. I've also researched human history and our own experiences with slavery and forced labor. Veltar's skin shifted to orange, which Jake had learned meant concern or warning. Mr. Martinez, I hope you understand that galactic servitude contracts are very different from primitive human slavery practices. Actually, Jake said loudly enough for everyone in the room to hear, I've concluded that they're exactly the same thing. The room erupted in surprised chatter. Several aliens stood up and began speaking rapidly in their own languages. The Kethai clicked their mandibles angrily while the Zephyrians hissed among themselves. Veltar raised all four of his arms for silence. Mr. Martinez, that is a very serious accusation. Galactic servitude law has been developed over centuries and represents the consensus of dozens of advanced civilizations. A consensus that benefits everyone except the people being owned, Jake replied. I've read the contracts and the law. No matter what fancy language you use, you're still buying and selling intelligent beings like property. A tall Zephyrian that Jake didn't recognize stood up and spoke in a threatening tone. Human, you are new to galactic society and do not understand the complexities involved. The servitude system provides structure and order that benefits all species. It benefits the species that won their wars, Jake shot back. The ones that lost get turned into slaves. The word slave sent another wave of angry muttering through the room. Jake could see that he had crossed the line by using such direct language. These aliens preferred their euphemisms and legal terminology. "Mr. Martinez," said a Cathay diplomat, "if you object to the servitude system, then simply sell the contract and remove yourself from participation. Many buyers would pay excellent prices." "That's not good enough," Jake said. "Selling Lyra to someone else doesn't solve the problem. It just makes her someone else's property." Jake reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device that he had prepared that morning. It was connected to the station's legal database and contained the electronic version of Lyra's servitude contract. Under Galactic Commercial Law Section 847.3, I have the right to dispose of my assets in any manner I choose. Today I am exercising that right. Veltar's skin turned bright red. "Mr. Martinez, what exactly are you planning to do?" Jake held up the device so everyone in the room could see it. "I am permanently destroying Lyra's servitude contract. Once the contract is deleted from all legal databases, she will no longer be anyone's property. She will be a free citizen under the protection of human law." The silence that followed Jake's announcement was complete and deafening. Every alien in the room stared at him with expressions of shock and disbelief. Behind him, Jake heard Lyra gasp, and her blue skin flared so brightly it lit up the entire corner of the room. SSK single quotes. Tal was the first to recover from his shock. "You cannot do this. That contract is worth over 1 million credits. You would destroy valuable property for no reason." "I'm not destroying property," Jake said calmly. "I'm freeing a person." Veltar stood up, and his skin cycled rapidly through multiple colors. "Mr. Martinez, this action violates the fundamental principles of galactic commerce. You cannot simply release a bonded servant without following proper procedures." "What procedures?" Jake asked. "Show me the law that says I can't destroy my own property." The alien lawyer frantically consulted his datapad, searching for legal precedents. Other aliens began shouting in multiple languages, creating a chaos of sound that filled the room. A Vorthan that looked like a walking diamond formation spoke in a voice like crystal chimes. "This sets a dangerous precedent. If owners can simply release their servants at will, the entire servitude system becomes..." Good, Jake said. "Maybe it's time for some instability." Jake woke up early the next morning with a plan. He needed to understand more about human history and how his own species had dealt with slavery in the past. The apartment had a powerful computer system that could access databases from across the galaxy, including Earth's historical records. Lyra was already awake and had prepared breakfast when Jake walked into the kitchen. She moved silently around the room, setting out food and drinks with perfect efficiency. Jake watched her work and noticed how she never made eye contact or spoke unless he asked her a direct question. "Good morning, Lyra," Jake said as he sat down at the table. "Good morning, Jake. I have prepared eggs and toast, as you seemed to enjoy simple foods yesterday. There is also coffee and fruit juice." Jake took a bite of the eggs and realized they were perfectly cooked. "This is really good." "Did you learn to cook human food from my uncle?" "Master Richard required me to learn the cooking styles of many different species. He entertained guests from across the galaxy and wanted to serve appropriate foods. I studied human cuisine along with Zephyrian, Cathay, and 12 other culinary traditions. That must have taken a lot of time and effort." Lyra's blue skin flickered slightly. "It was my duty to serve Master Richard's needs. The time and effort were not important." After breakfast, Jake sat down at the computer and began searching through Earth's historical databases. What he found made him feel sick to his stomach. Humans had practiced slavery for thousands of years. Millions of people had been bought and sold like property. Entire civilizations had been built on the backs of enslaved workers. Jake read about the Atlantic slave trade that brought Africans to the Americas in chains. He learned about indentured servants who worked for years to pay off debts they could never escape. He discovered that slavery had existed in almost every human culture at some point in history. But Jake also read about the people who fought against slavery. Abolitionists who risked their lives to help enslaved people escape to freedom. Political leaders who worked to change laws and end the legal ownership of human beings. Regular people who decided that owning another person was wrong, no matter what the law said. The more Jake read, the more ashamed he felt about his own species. Humans had spent centuries enslaving each other, and now they had joined a galactic civilization that enslaved other species. Instead of learning from their mistakes, humans seemed to be repeating them on a cosmic scale. Jake called up more recent records about humanity's integration into galactic society. He discovered that human diplomats and business leaders had quickly adapted to the servitude system. Human colonies now owned thousands of alien servants. Human companies participated in the trade of sentient beings across multiple star systems. The official human position was that galactic servitude contracts were different from historical human slavery because they were temporary and supposedly voluntary. But Jake could see that this was just an excuse to justify participating in a system that was morally wrong. Jake looked up from the computer and saw Lyra cleaning the living room. She moved with graceful efficiency, dusting furniture and organizing objects. Her blue skin glowed softly in the morning light streaming through the windows. She was beautiful and intelligent, and completely trapped by a legal system that treated her like property. "Lyra," Jake called out, "can you come here for a minute?" She walked over and stood beside his chair with her hands folded and her head slightly bowed. "Yes, Jake? I've been reading about human history, and I want to ask you something. Do you know about slavery on Earth?" Lyra's skin flickered brighter for a moment. "I know some human history. Master Richard sometimes discussed Earth's past when he entertained human business partners. He said that humans had learned to move beyond their primitive slavery practices by joining galactic civilization." Jake felt anger rising in his chest. His uncle and other humans had convinced themselves that galactic servitude was somehow better than human slavery. They used legal contracts and fancy language to hide the fact that they were still buying and selling people. "What do you think about that?" Jake asked. Lyra was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was very careful. "It is not my place to judge the decisions of my masters. I'm not asking as your master. I'm asking for your honest opinion. I do not understand the difference." Jake realized that Lyra had been trained never to express opinions that might displease her owners. She had learned to suppress her own thoughts and feelings to avoid punishment. The idea that someone actually wanted to know what she thought was foreign to her. "Let me put it another way," Jake said. "If you could change the galactic servitude system, would you?" Lyra stared at him for a long time. Her black eyes seemed to search his face, looking for some kind of trap. Finally, she spoke in a whisper. "I would free every Aetherian still trapped in servitude. I would restore our people's dignity and honor. I would make sure no species ever again faced what we have endured." The raw emotion in her voice made Jake's heart ache. For just a moment, the perfect servant mask had slipped, and he saw the proud warrior woman underneath. The woman who had sacrificed everything to save children and still dreamed of freedom for her people. "Thank you for being honest with me," Jake said. Lyra's mask snapped back into place immediately. "I apologize if I spoke inappropriately. I will be more careful in the future. You didn't do anything wrong. I want you to feel like you can speak honestly with me." But Lyra had already retreated back into her servant role. She stood perfectly still, waiting for his next command, and Jake could see that she regretted showing him her true feelings. Jake spent the rest of the morning making video calls to Earth. His first call was to his old friend Ben Collins, who had become a lawyer specializing in interspecies law. Ben worked for a big firm in New York that handled legal issues between human colonies and alien governments. Jake, Ben said when his face appeared on the screen. I heard about your inheritance. 2 million credits? That's incredible, man. You're set for life. It's not that simple, Ben. There are some complications. Jake explained about Lyra and the servitude contract. He told Ben about the galactic legal system and how humans had become part of it. Ben listened with a serious expression on his face. Jake, you need to be very careful here, Ben said when Jake finished explaining. Galactic servitude law is extremely complex and well established. If you try to interfere with a legal contract, you could face serious consequences. What kind of consequences? Economic sanctions against Earth, diplomatic problems for human colonies, legal action against you personally. The galactic community takes these contracts very seriously. They see them as the foundation of interspecies commerce. So I'm supposed to just accept that I own another intelligent being? Ben sighed and rubbed his forehead. Look, Jake, I understand how this seems from a human moral perspective. But we're not on Earth anymore. We're part of a galactic civilization with its own laws and customs. Sometimes we have to adapt to survive. Adapt by becoming slave owners? It's not slavery, Jake. These are legal contracts with defined terms and protections for the servants. It's more like very long-term employment. Jake felt disgusted by his friend's casual acceptance of the system. Would you sign a 19-year contract to be someone's property? That's not a fair comparison. Humans aren't in the same position as the Etherians. Why not? Because we won our wars. The blunt honesty of that statement hit Jake like a physical blow. Humans accepted galactic servitude because they were on the winning side. They got to be masters instead of slaves, so they convinced themselves. The system was fair. Jake made several more calls to human officials and business leaders. Every single one of them gave him the same advice. Don't rock the boat. Don't challenge the system. Be grateful for his good fortune and learn to work within galactic society. Human diplomat named Patricia Wade was particularly blunt. Mr. Martinez, humanity has worked very hard to gain acceptance in galactic civilization. We can't afford to have individual humans making moral stands that damage our relationships with other species. Your uncle understood this and built his fortune by following established customs. So I should just ignore my conscience? You should remember that you represent all of humanity, whether you want to or not. Other species are watching to see how humans handle these situations. If you cause problems, it reflects badly on all of us. Jake ended the call feeling more frustrated than ever. It seemed like every human leader had decided that joining galactic civilization was worth compromising their moral principles. They had traded human values for economic and political success. That afternoon, Jake received his first offer to buy Lyra's contract. A Zephyrian merchant named Sktal contacted him through the apartment's communication system. The alien's scaly green face filled the screen as he made his pitch. Human Jake, I am prepared to offer you 800,000 credits for the Etherian's contract. This is a very generous price that reflects her excellent training and appearance. She's not for sale, Jake said immediately. Sktal's yellow eyes widened in surprise. Perhaps you do not understand the value of what you own. Trained Etherian. Servants are highly prized. I could easily find buyers willing to pay over 1 million credits. I said she's not for sale. Jake's uncle's apartment was 3 times bigger than any place Jake had ever lived. The walls were covered with art from different alien worlds, and expensive furniture filled every room. Large windows looked out over the best part of Luna Station, where wealthy traders and diplomats lived their comfortable lives. Lyra walked to the center of the main room and stood there waiting for orders. She had not spoken a single word during the entire trip from the lawyer's office. Jake set down the datapad full of legal documents and looked around the fancy apartment that was now his home. "You don't have to just stand there," Jake said to Lyra. "You can sit down or whatever you want to do." Lyra remained perfectly still. "What would you like me to do, Master Jake?" she asked in a soft voice that sounded like music. The word master made Jake's skin crawl. "Just call me Jake, and I don't know what I want you to do." "What did you do for my uncle?" "I maintained his household. I prepared his meals. I managed his schedule. I accompanied him to business meetings when he required my presence. I provided whatever services Master Richard needed." Lyra's voice never changed tone, and she never looked directly at Jake. Jake sat down on the couch and picked up the datapad. "Well, I don't need any of that stuff right now. Why don't you just relax or something?" For the first time, Lyra seemed confused. She tilted her head slightly, and her glowing blue skin flickered. "I do not understand. What task would you like me to perform?" "No task. Just do whatever you want to do." Lyra stood silent for a long moment. Finally, she spoke again. "I want to serve you properly, Jake. Please tell me what you require." Jake realized that Lyra had been a servant for so long, she did not know how to be anything else. He decided to focus on the legal documents and figure out what he had gotten himself into. The datapad contained hundreds of pages of contracts, trade agreements, and legal records. Jake spent the next several hours reading about galactic commerce law. Most of it was boring business stuff about shipping routes and trade tariffs. But buried in the middle was a section about servitude contracts that made Jake's stomach turn. The Etherian species had been a proud warrior race that controlled several star systems. 23 years ago, they fought a war against an alliance of other alien species. The Etherians lost badly, and their entire civilization collapsed. Millions of Etherians died in the fighting, and millions more died from starvation and disease after their worlds were destroyed. The surviving Etherians were forced to pay massive war debts to the species that defeated them. Since they had no money or resources left, many Etherians sold themselves into legal servitude. The contracts allowed them to work for other species in exchange for food, shelter, and medical care. The money they earned went to pay off the war debts. In theory, the contracts were supposed to last only a few years until the debts were paid. In practice, the system was designed to keep Etherians trapped forever. The cost of their food and shelter was deducted from their earnings. Medical care was expensive. Interest was charged on unpaid debts. Most Etherians could never earn enough money to buy their freedom. Jake looked up from the datapad and saw Lyra still standing in the exact same spot. She had not moved for over 3 hours. Her blue skin continued to glow softly, and her black eyes stared at nothing. "Lyra," Jake said, "can you tell me about your family?" For the first time, Lyra's perfect stillness broke. Her hands trembled, and her skin flickered brighter for a moment. "What would you like to know, Jake?" "Whatever you want to tell me. Where are you from? Do you have family?" Lyra was quiet for so long Jake thought she would not answer. When she finally spoke, her musical voice was very soft. "I had a family once. My parents and my younger brother. We lived on Etheria Prime before the war." "What happened to them?" Another long silence. "They died in the bombardment of our capital city. I was off-world when it happened. I came home and found nothing but ruins and bodies." Jake felt a weight settle in his chest. "I'm sorry. That must have been terrible." After the war ended, there were many orphan children on the surviving Etherian worlds. They were sick and hungry and had no one to care for them. I sold my servitude contract to buy medical supplies and food for them. "How long was your contract supposed to last?" 5 years. But the children needed more help than I expected. I had to extend my contract twice to pay for their care. Now I owe 14 more years of service. Jake did some quick math in his head. Lyra had already served 5 years and still owed 14 more. By the time she earned her freedom, she would be an old woman. If she lived that long. What happened to the children you helped? For the first time since Jake met her, Lyra almost smiled. Most of them survived. They are adults now and have families of their own. Some of them became doctors or teachers. Some joined the few Etherian colonies that still exist. That's good, Jake said. You saved their lives. It was my duty, Lyra replied. Etherians protect our young above all else, even if it costs us everything. Jake went back to reading the legal documents. He learned that his uncle Richard had bought Lyra's contract from a Zephyrian merchant who specialized in Etherian servants. The price was enormous, but Uncle Richard was very wealthy. The contract gave him complete legal ownership of Lyra for the remaining 19 years of her service term. Jake also discovered that the galactic legal system considered servitude contracts to be normal business arrangements. Dozens of species participated in the system, both as servants and masters. The Kethai used indentured servants from 3 different conquered species. The Zephyrians had an entire class of people who were born into servitude and never knew freedom. Even some human colonies had started using alien servants. The more Jake read, the angrier he became. The entire galactic civilization was built on a foundation of slavery. They used fancy legal language and called it indentured servitude. But it was still one group of people owning another group of people. And somehow his own species had decided this was acceptable. Jake looked at Lyra again. She had not moved or spoken for another hour. Her beautiful blue skin and graceful features hid a tragic story of loss and sacrifice. She had given up her freedom to save orphan children, and now she belonged to him like a piece of property. Lyra, Jake said, are you hungry? Do you want something to eat? I will prepare a meal for you, Jake. What would you prefer? I meant for you. When do you eat? Lyra seemed confused again. I eat when my duties permit. Usually after my master has finished his evening meal. Jake realized that Lyra was trained to put his needs before her own in everything. She probably had not eaten since breakfast and would not eat again until he dismissed her for the night. The idea made him feel sick. Let's both eat now, Jake said. I don't know how to cook anything fancy, but I can make something simple. That is not necessary, Jake. Cooking is my responsibility. Maybe we can cook together. Lyra stared at him, like he had suggested something impossible. I do not understand. Masters do not cook with their servants. Jake stood up and walked toward the kitchen. Well, maybe it's time for some new rules. The kitchen was huge and filled with equipment from different alien worlds. Jake had no idea how to use most of it. He found some basic ingredients and started making a simple pasta dish that his mother had taught him years ago. Lyra followed him into the kitchen and watched his every move with fascination. When Jake handed her a knife and asked her to chop vegetables, she hesitated like she was afraid of doing something wrong. It's okay, Jake said. Just cut them into small pieces. There's no wrong way to do it. As they worked together, Jake tried to learn more about Etherian culture. Lyra told him about the beautiful crystal cities her people had built and the art and music they created. She described the honor codes that governed Etherian society and the deep bonds between family members. We were not a perfect people, Lyra said as she carefully diced an onion. We were proud and sometimes arrogant. We thought our military was stronger than it was. But we valued truth and loyalty above all else. An Etherian's word was considered sacred. It sounds like a good way to live, Jake said. It was, until the war came and destroyed everything we had built over thousands of years. They ate dinner together at the small table in the kitchen instead of the formal dining room. Lyra seemed nervous about sitting at the same table as Jake, but she did not protest. She ate very little and kept looking around, like she expected someone to tell her she was doing something wrong. After dinner, Jake tried to get Lyra to relax and watch some entertainment programs, but she insisted on cleaning the kitchen first. She worked with efficient precision and had everything spotless in minutes. Jake watched her move around the kitchen and realized she had been trained to be the perfect servant in every way. "Lyra," Jake said when she finished cleaning, "what do you do for fun? What did you like to do before the war?" She thought about this for a long time. "I like to sing. Etherians have a tradition of song stories that tell the history of our people. I knew many of the old songs." "Would you sing something for me?" Lyra shook her head. "It would not be appropriate. Those songs are about freedom and honor. They are not suitable for a servant to sing." Jake felt another wave of anger at the system that had broken this proud woman's spirit. "Maybe someday you'll feel like singing again." Jake Martinez wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished loading the last cargo container onto the transport ship. The work was hard, but it paid enough to keep him alive on Luna Station. He had been doing this job for 3 years now, and never expected his life to change. The message that came through his personal communicator that morning seemed like some kind of joke. "Your uncle, Richard Martinez, has died and left you his entire estate. Please come to the Luna Station legal complex immediately to handle the inheritance paperwork." Jake stared at the message again. He barely remembered Uncle Richard. The man had left Earth when Jake was just a kid and never came back. His parents always said Richard was the black sheep of the family who got rich doing business with aliens. They never talked about him much, and Jake never cared to ask Dot. But now Richard was dead, and apparently Jake was his only living relative. The lawyer's office was in the fancy part of Luna Station, where Jake never went. Rich people and important aliens lived there. Jake looked down at his dirty work clothes and decided he should at least try to clean up before meeting with lawyers. 2 hours later, Jake stood outside the biggest law office he had ever seen. The sign read Veltar and Associates, Interspecies. Legal services in 5 different languages. 3 of them looked like alien writing that Jake could not read. He took a deep breath and walked inside. The waiting room was huge and filled with different kinds of aliens. Jake recognized some of them from working at the docks. There were tall, thin Zephyrians with their green, scaly skin and yellow eyes. A group of insect-like Kethi clicked and buzzed as they talked to each other. In the corner sat a Vorthan that looked like a walking crystal formation. All of them wore expensive clothes and seemed to belong in this fancy place. Jake felt very out of place in his clean but cheap work clothes. A human receptionist called his name and led him down a long hallway lined with paintings of famous alien leaders. She stopped at a large door and knocked twice before opening it. The office inside was bigger than Jake's entire apartment. Behind a massive desk sat an alien that Jake had never seen before. It had 4 arms and skin that changed colors as it moved. This had to be Veltar the lawyer. Around the room sat 6 other aliens, all watching Jake with great interest. "Mr. Martinez," said Veltar in perfect English, "please sit down. We have been waiting for you." Jake sat in the only empty chair, which was clearly meant for humans. He felt all the alien eyes studying him, and it made him nervous. Veltar shuffled through some papers with 2 of his hands, while the other 2 hands typed on a computer. "Your Uncle Richard was a very successful merchant," Veltar began. "He traded with many species across this sector and built a considerable fortune. According to his, will you inherit everything? His ships, his trading routes, his bank accounts, and all his other possessions." One of the Zephyrians leaned forward and spoke in a hissing voice. "The human should know what he is inheriting before he signs anything." Veltar's skin shifted. to a darker purple color. Of course, Mr. Martinez, your inheritance includes your uncle's private residence here on Luna Station, 3 cargo ships, trading licenses with 12 different worlds, and approximately 2 million credits in various galactic currencies. Jake's mouth fell open. 2 million credits was more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. He tried to speak, but no words came out. However, continued Veltar, there is one additional asset that requires special attention. The lawyer pressed a button on his desk, and a door opened on the far side of the room. Jake turned to look, and his breath caught in his throat. The most beautiful woman he had ever seen walked into the room. But she was not human dot. Her skin was a soft blue color that seemed to glow with its own light. Her hair was silver and moved like liquid mercury as she walked. She was tall and graceful with features that were almost human, but somehow more perfect. Her eyes were large and completely black, with no visible pupils. She wore a simple white dress that looked expensive. Alien woman walked to the center of the room and stood there with her head down. She did not look at Jake or anyone else. Her hands were folded in front of her, and she stood perfectly still like a statue. "This is Lyra," said Veltar. "She is an Aetherian and has been bound to your uncle by a legal servitude contract for the past 5 years. Under galactic law, she now belongs to you." Jake stared at the woman. Belongs to him? What did that mean? He looked around the room and saw that all the aliens were watching him carefully. Their expressions were hard to read, but Jake got the feeling they were waiting for something important. "I don't understand," Jake said finally. "What do you mean? She belongs to me?" A Kethai clicked its mandibles and spoke in a buzzing voice. "The Aetherian is property. Your uncle owned her legal contract. Now you own her contract. She must serve you until you sell the contract, or she dies." Jake felt sick to his stomach. He looked at Lyra again, but she still had not moved or looked up. Her beautiful blue skin seemed to glow a little brighter, but maybe that was just his imagination. "This is legal?" Jake asked. "Completely legal under galactic law," said Veltar. "The Aetherians lost the sector war 23 years ago. Many of them sold themselves into servitude contracts to pay war debts or support their families. Lyra's contract was purchased by your uncle in good faith, and all proper procedures were followed." The Zephyrian merchant leaned forward again. "The human must decide what to do with her. Many buyers would pay well for an Aetherian servant, especially one as attractive as this one." Jake felt anger rising in his chest. These aliens were talking about Lyra like she was a piece of furniture or a pet. She was clearly intelligent and aware of everything being said about her. He could see her hands trembling slightly, even though she tried to stand perfectly still. "What happens if I don't want to own another person?" Jake asked. The room went very quiet. Several aliens looked at each other with surprise. The crystal. Vorthan made a sound like wind chimes being shaken. Veltar's skin changed to a bright orange color. "Mr. Martinez, you must understand that this is how galactic society functions. Many species have servitude contracts. It is a normal part of interspecies commerce. Your uncle understood this and participated in the system like any successful trader." "But I'm not my uncle," Jake said. A different Zephyrian spoke up. "Humans are new to galactic society. You must learn how things work if you want to be successful. Keeping servants shows other species that you understand proper business relationships." Jake looked at Lyra again. For just a moment, she raised her head, and their eyes met. In that brief instant, Jake saw something in her black eyes that made his heart ache. It was not hope or fear or anger. It was resignation. She expected nothing good from him, because nothing good had happened to her in a very long time. "I need time to think about this," Jake said. Veltar nodded. "Of course. This is a significant inheritance. Take all the time you need." Lyra will remain in your uncle's residence until you decide what to do with her. Here are the access codes and legal documents. The lawyer handed Jake a datapad loaded with information. Jake stood up and looked around the room one more time. All the aliens were still watching him with great interest. He had the feeling that his next decision would be very important to all of them. As Jake walked toward the door, Lyra finally moved. She followed him at a respectful distance with her head down again. Jake realized she was coming with him, whether he wanted her to or not. The aliens in the room began talking among themselves in various languages as soon as Jake left. Walking through the fancy corridors of the legal complex, Jake tried to process everything that had just happened. A few hours ago, he was a poor cargo loader. Now he was rich beyond his wildest dreams. But he also owned another intelligent being, and everyone seemed to think that was perfectly normal. Jake glanced back at Lyra, walking silently behind him. Blue skin still glowed softly, and her silver hair caught the light from the ceiling panels. She was beautiful, but she was also clearly miserable. The way she held herself reminded Jake of pictures he had seen of prisoners or refugees. As they rode the transport back to the residential sector, Jake made a decision. He was going to learn everything he could about Ether and servitude contracts and galactic law. He was going to understand exactly what his uncle had gotten him into. And then he was going to figure out what kind of man he wanted to be in this strange new life that had been dropped in his lap.